Well, good morning. This is Plant Smart Living with Farmer Fred. It's a beautiful day here in Pennsylvania. It's a nice low humidity day. Sun's starting to shine here. And we're so thankful you can join us this morning. I want to talk about a very important topic. If you've decided to go ahead and build yourself a raised planter bed or a garden, or even container gardening, we need to be able to consider some very important site locations where you're going to be putting your garden. For instance, when I built this house here, I had to decide where I wanted to locate the house. And so I picked a site here on a partial grade, about 15% grade, and this house also, it faces south, and so it's on the east-west axis. I'm standing at the east side of the house, and towards the trellis is the west. And so we get full sun during the whole day, especially in the winter time. The sun's low, and so we get the sun's rays inside the house, heating the house, and that's what you would call passive solar. And so it's very similar to when we're wanting to install our vegetable garden, where we place our containers if we want to do container gardening. One thing we need to consider is how much sun these plants require. So let's take a walk over to the garden here and talk about where you should locate your raised planter bed or even your container gardens. And so, you know, say you even live in a townhouse where you have a balcony, these things you would want to be able to consider where you locate them. And so first of all, you want to make sure that you have 6 to 8 hours of full sunlight. Now, for instance, these tomatoes here, they love the sun. And so you want to make sure that these tomatoes and your peppers over here, the more sun the better. They love their warm feet too. They love the heat. You can see I have here black plastic on the ground here. The black plastic keeps the weeds down. Not only that, it warms the soils up in the early spring, allowing the plants to grow quicker. I think of those who maybe live in places like Canada. Will Krisky, for instance, from Potato Strong, he has a great website, but he also has a raised garden bed that he's growing his plants in. And this is one good thing you could do, is to plant your peppers and tomatoes in black plastic, because it warms the soil temperatures. The soil microbes like about a 70-degree soil temperature before they begin breaking down the organic matter. And so a good vegetable garden demands full sun, and the more the better. Approximately 6 to 8 hours of full sun for your tomatoes, your peppers, your melons. And the black plastic really helps in assisting the plants to grow much quicker in the spring. And so you also could plant your greens, your kale, or your Swiss chard in partial shade. For instance, I have these right here. These get mostly afternoon sun. This is my curly leaf kale right here. And so I thought I would do an experiment here this year. These were some leftover plants I had, and so I planted them along this edge. Kind of gives it a nice little texture there. But these get partial sun in the afternoon. And so they've been doing quite well here, not receiving 6 to 8 hours of sun. So let's take a walk up here and take a look at my garden beds, what I did here. Even this garden bed here, my 18 by 30 foot raised bed, it's on an east-west axis, so it gets the full afternoon sun. And so let's take a walk up here. If you remember Jungle here, we did a film on him the other day. His Sun Gold tomatoes are ripening very nicely here. And so let's just continue up here to give you an idea the direction I face these planters, these raised garden beds. I built this little illustration here showing that these beds go from east to west, the axis, east to west axis, and then north would be on the right and south on the left. And so this way they'll get full sunlight during the whole day. And let me show you something else you'd want to be careful of. If you notice, I planted, this is basil right here in the foreground, and there's some more Swiss chard. You know how I love my Swiss chard. But anyhow, I planted them in the foreground of these tomato plants here. These are the indeterminate tomato plants, and they just continue to grow through the season. These will probably get 6 to 8 feet high. But anyhow, I planted them in the foreground so that they wouldn't be shadowed by the tall tomato plants. Now, if you had tall tomato plants in the foreground, you could plant some greens on the north side of your tomato plants, because they like partial shade. And so, you know, you can see here I have my kale that receives full sun during the day. More peppers, again, they love full sun. Let's take a walk over here and show you the melon patch. They again are going to receive full sun during the day. And so you just want to consider where you place your planters, and you want to make sure they're not under any shade trees or over any kind of root systems, because the roots will rob any nutrients from the garden bed that you would install on the ground. And even my grade here, it's about a 15% grade. You can see that I terraced my raised garden beds a little bit, stepped them down, try to keep them pretty level. I also planted, you remember jungle here on my earlier videos. If you notice, I planted him there on the south side of my trellis, so it would receive full sun during the day, a good 8 hours. All this has to do with photosynthesis. That's where the plants receive light energy from the sun, which converts it into fuel for the plants. And so that would be a good subject maybe you could study to help us understand why these plants need full sun. So let me just show you here also. Right here I put this spot. I had tomato plant growing here last year, and so it would have received full sun, but this is the south side of this building structure. Also, if you remember Slim Jim here, these two indeterminate tomato plants, you can see how they're just continually growing and growing inside my outdoor shower. One of these days I hope to be able to eat those nuggets of sweetness from my shower stall once they ripen. But anyhow, you can see this is getting full sunlight even this early in the day here. These elephant ears love full sun, so they're getting a lot of sun. Same with the vincas, they love full sun. Now, just as an example, you see I put these two containers here. Now, this is the north side of the structure. If you were to plant tomatoes in there or peppers, they wouldn't really grow very well. They would actually be stunted because they're not going to receive full sunlight. So you do want to consider where you put your container plants so that they try to get full sun. And just as a reminder too, this whole gardening experience is certainly a big learning curve. I know it has been for me. I've gone through a lot of trial and error. Now, I did put some pots over here. Say you wanted to plant some greens, you can do them in partial shade. In fact, next year I hope to maybe do some videos on container gardening and some options as to where you can locate your containers, or even your planter beds. But if these would be under a tree and receive partial shade, you'd be okay planting some kale or some chard or any type of green, leafy green under there. They don't seem to require as much sunlight. And so let's just review some of the things we discussed. You want to make sure that you have full sun, a good 6 to 8 hours. You know, the more the better. Tomatoes, peppers, melons, they love the full sun. They're going to be healthy and strong as they grow, receiving the full sun. Again, if they're in the shade, they're going to become leggy. And so you also want to keep your garden bed away from shade trees and roots, because they'll rob the nutrients from the soil. And also, if you have to terrace your raised planter beds, to step them down and keep them as level as possible. And remember, a gardening rule that I've learned is you want to start small and build off of your successes, because gardening for me definitely has been a big learning curve. And so I hope this information has been helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the section below. And so I hope you have a wonderful and glorious day. Until next time, this is Plant Smart Living with Farmer Fred.